Canto 1, The Creation. Chapter 3, Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Text 2. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Yasyambasi shayanasya yoga nidram vitanvataha nabhiradambujad asid brahma vishwasrijampati. Yasyambasi shayanasya yoga nidram vitanvataha nabhiradambujad asid brahma vishwasrijampati. Yasyambasi shayanasya yoga nidram vitanvataha nabhiradambujad asid brahma vishwasrijampati. Everyone can chant.
Hare Krishna. Yashambhasi shayanasya yoga nidram vitanvataha nabhiradam bujad asid Brahma Vishwasrajampati.
Yashyambasi shayanasya yoga nidram vitanvataha nabhiridam pujad asid brahma vishvasrijampati.
Hare Krishna. Yasyambasi sayanasya yoga nidram vitanvataha nabhi hirdam bhujada asid brahma visva srijampati. Hare Krishna.
Yasyambhasi sayanasya yoga nidram vitanvata nabhihridam bhujad asid brahma vishwasrijampati.
Yasyambhasi shayanasya yoga nidram vitanvataha nabhihridam bhujadasit brahma vishwasrijampati.
Anyone else? No?
No, Hare Krishna. Yasyambhasi sayanasya yoga nidrama vitanvataha nabhi hirdam pujad asid brahma vishwasrijampati. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yasyambasi sanyasya yoga nidram vitanvata nabhihridam bhujadasid brahma vishvasrijampati. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you. Word for word translation. Yasya, whose? Ambasi, in the water. Shayanasya, lying down. Yoga nidram, sleeping in meditation. Vitanvata, ministering. Nabhi, navel. Hrada, out of the lake. Ambujat, from the lotus. Asit, was manifested. Brahma, the grandfather of the living beings. Vishwa, the universe. Srijam, the engineers. Pati, master. Translation. A part of the Purusha lies down within the water of the universe. From the navel lake of his body sprouts a lotus stem, and from the lotus flower atop this stem, Brahma, the master of all engineers in the universe, becomes manifest. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The first Purusha is the Karanodakashayi Vishnu. From his skin holes, innumerable universes have sprung up. In each and every universe, the Purusha enters as the Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. He is lying within the half of the universe which is full with the water of his body. And from the navel of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu has sprung the stem of the lotus flower, the birthplace of Brahma, who is the father of all living beings and the master of all the demigod engineers engaged in the perfect design and working of the universal order. Within the stem of the lotus, there are 14 divisions of planetary systems, and the earthly planets are situated in the middle. Upwards, there are other, better planetary systems, and the topmost system is called Brahmaloka or Satyaloka. Downwards from the earthly planetary system, there are 7 lower planetary systems inhabited by the Asuras and similar other materialistic living beings. From Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, there is expansion of the Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, who is the collective Paramatma of all living beings. He is called Hari, and from him all incarnations within the universe are expanded. Therefore, the conclusion is that the Purusha avatar is manifested in 3 features. First, the Karanodakashayi, who creates aggregate material ingredients in the Mahatattva. Second, the Garbhodakashayi, who enters in each and every universe. And third, the Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, who is the Paramatma of every material object, organic or inorganic. One who knows these plenary features of the personality of Godhead knows Godhead properly, and thus the knower becomes freed from the material conditions of birth, death, old age, and disease, as it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. In this shloka, the subject matter of Mahavishnu is summarized. The Mahavishnu lies down in some part of the spiritual sky by his own free will. Thus he lies on the ocean of Karana, from where he glances over his material nature, and the Mahatattva is at once created. Thus, electrified by the power of the Lord, the material nature at once creates innumerable universes, just as in due course a tree decorates itself with innumerable grown fruits. The seed of the tree is sown by the cultivator, and the tree or creeper in due course becomes manifested with so many fruits. Nothing can take place without a cause. The Karana ocean is therefore called the causal ocean. Karana means causal. We should not foolishly accept the atheistic theory of creation. The description of the atheist is given in the Bhagavad Gita. The atheist does not believe in the creator, but he cannot give a good theory to explain the creation. Material nature has no power to create without the power of the Purusha, just as a Prakriti or woman cannot produce a child without the connection of a Purusha or man. The Purusha impregnates and the Prakriti delivers. We should not expect milk from the fleshy bags on the neck of a goat, although they look like breastly nipples. Similarly, we should not expect any creative power from the material ingredients. We must believe in the power of the Purusha, who impregnates Prakriti or nature. Because the Lord wished to lie down in meditation, the material energy created innumerable universes at once. In each of them, the Lord lay down, and thus all the planets and the different paraphernalia were created at once by the will of the Lord. The Lord has unlimited potencies, and thus he can act as he likes by perfect planning, although personally he has nothing to do. No one is greater than or equal to him. That is the verdict of the Vedas. Yasyambasi shayanasya yoganidram vitanvata nabhiradam bujarasid brahma vishwasrajampati. A part of the Purusha lies down within the water of the universe. From the navel lake of his body sprouts a lotus stem. And from the lotus flower atop this stem, Brahma, the master of all engineers in the universe, becomes manifest. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschadade Shatarine. This is a truly awesome chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This chapter in particular is answering one of the questions of the sages. Going back to the first chapter, we remember Shonaka Rishi, representing the sages, asked things like, what's the best religious principles? What's the essence of the scriptures? And one of those questions was, Tasya karmanyudarani parigitani suribi bruhina shraddhananam lilaya dadata kala. Tasya karmanyudarani, that the Lord performs so many magnanimous activities, udarani, magnanimous, meaning activities that are beneficial for the whole world. Parigitani suribi, parigita means, and they're loudly sung and broadcast all over. By whom? By suribi, by the greatest of the demigods and the sages. I think in the translation, Prabhupada specifically names Narada, because he's the rishi among the demigods. But all the great demigods, all the great sages are glorifying these pastimes of the Lord. Bruhina shraddhananam. And we have great faith, and we want to hear with great faith these pastimes. I can't remember if it was in Sunday Feast lecture or in my morning class last month where I discussed a little bit about this term shraddha. Shraddha means faith, but it's actually much more than that. What it really means is a strong desire to hear from the authorities with full faith. So bruhina shraddhananam, we eagerly want to hear about what? Lilaya dadada kala, the lila, the pastimes, the incarnations of kala, all the expansions and avatars of the Lord. So this whole chapter is answering that question with a long list and what's the word I'm looking for? Small, like postage stamp size descriptions of each avatar, of some of the primary avatars. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary, he says that Tasya Karmanyudarani, that this is referring to all the different avatars with their appearances in the material world. But Jiva Goswami says that specifically, Shonaka was asking about the avatars who are responsible for creating this world, namely the Purusha avatars, which is what we're starting off with. So also, a friend of mine in Vrindavan who recently passed away, Bhuvaneshwar Prabhu, he used to say that when you're giving class, you quote a shloka, you make a joke, and you tell some little story of how I came to Krishna consciousness. So this chapter has a personal, I have personal affection for this chapter. I had an experience with it in my coming to Krishna consciousness. I started visiting the temple in New York, and I became a life member, and they started selling me books. And then I went away from home. I went away to college, and I took those books with me, and I had Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. At that time, the only volume published was Planting the Seed. I had Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavad Gita, and the first three books of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the first canto. So for better or for worse, instead of studying my school books, I was reading all of those books while at school. And I was reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and I wasn't a devotee, but I was very interested, and I was still very fallen and very grossly sinful in every way, but I was still reading these books. And I came to this chapter, and I was reading this chapter, the Purusha avatars and all the different incarnations, Matsya and Korma and the four Kumars and so many things. And then I came to this verse later in the chapter, which I'll read. This is text 29. Janmaguyam Bhagavato Ya etad prayato nara sayam pratar grinan bhaktya dukkha gramad vimuchyate. Whoever carefully recites the mysterious appearance of the Lord with devotion in the morning and in the evening gets relief from all miseries of life. So I was a fallen person in every way, suffering in material life, but I read that verse that if you recite these mysterious appearances, then you'll get free from all the miseries of life. And I thought, yeah, I would really like to get freed from all the miseries of life. So I wasn't a devotee, I wasn't chanting. I had beads. Sometimes I would chant. It would take me about an hour to chant one round because my mind was all over the universe. But I read that you'll get relief from all the miseries of life. So for a long time, I made it a habit of every day reading through this chapter, although I wasn't really engaged in any other devotional principles, but I was taken by that you could get freed from the miseries of life by reading this. So for many months, actually, I kept up this habit of every day reading this chapter. Krishna is the source of all incarnations. And it didn't give me any, mystical experience or all of a sudden I was dancing in bliss, but it had an effect in the long run. And that long run is still ongoing after all these years. And after that, I left school. I actually dropped out of college and moved into the temple, partially due to that. So this is my affection for this chapter. And especially this beginning part, the Purusha avatars, is very interesting. And it's significant, starting with the Purusha avatars. The Purusha avatars means this process of creation. Now we look at, let's take the Bible. The Bible starts off, in the beginning, God created. And Prabhupada would comment on this several times, that in the beginning, God created. So this is the beginning of the Bible. What's the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Very first words, Janmadyasya yataha, and Srimad Bhagavatam and Vedanta Sutra, Janmadyasya yataha, that Krishna is the creation, the maintenance, and the dissolution of everything. Ishopanishad starts, Om Purnamadat Purnamidam, that the Supreme Lord is complete, and he's so complete that he's giving rise to all the expansions of the universe and all the creation and all the living entities who are also complete. But he's so complete that he's creating these, but his completeness is not reduced in the least. And Brahma Samhita, again, Lord Brahma himself, the engineer, starts off his song, Ishwara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadir, Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He has no beginning, Anadir, Adir, but he's the beginning of everything. He's the creation of everything. Sarva Karana Karanam, this word Karana, again, like the Karana ocean, he's the cause of all causes. So this is an extremely important, vital point. This is the first point, the first step in defining or understanding what is God. And Bhagavad Gita actually takes an interesting tact with this. Bhagavad Gita does not start off with Krishna proclaiming, I'm the creator, I'm the source of everything, because it's a different kind of work, Bhagavad Gita. It's a conversation, and he's trying to convince someone to do something. So the whole first 6 chapters, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, you have to do your duty or people will criticize you. You need to do karma yoga. You need to do dhyana yoga. You need to do jnana yoga, all these things. And then not until the end of the 6th chapter does Krishna really even mention himself at all, when he says that, well, if you're going to be a yogi, but the best yogi meditates on me. What's that verse from the last verse of the 6th chapter? Who can refresh my memory? Anyone?
Yoginam api sarvesham.
Yes, thank you. Yoginam api sarvesham madgiten antaratmana shradavan bhajate yomam samayukta tamo mata. That's actually really the first time when Krishna really proclaims himself as something special. And then in the 7th chapter, then he starts laying it out. his position as the creator. Boom. This is in the 7th chapter. All Bhumirapanulo vayu kamino budare vacha ahankara iti min bine prakriti ashtara. That this, all the materials of this material world are my energies. Aham kritsnasya jagata prabhava pralayastata. From a couple of verses later, I am the creator of everything and the annihilator of everything, the creator and destroyer of the whole universe. Mai savarmidam protam suche maniganaiva. Everything is resting on me just like pearls are strung on a thread. So, and when he starts describing himself, actually, in the 7th chapter, then he's explaining himself as the creator of everything, the source of everything, because that's how we understand God. That's how we understand Krishna. Then in the 10th canto, Aham sarvasya, he makes it so clear. Aham sarvasya prabhavo, matak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. He proclaims himself, he's the creator of everything. All spiritual worlds, all material worlds are emanating from me. So why is it important to understand God as the creator, as the source of everything? Because iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita, that when you understand that this is the nature of God, that if you're Buddha, if you're a little bit intelligent, then you'll understand that you have to worship Krishna. This person who is the source of everything, who is creating everything, is the person to whom we have to give our worship, our surrender, and ultimately our love. That's why this is important to understand this. When you understand who is the creator, then all the principles of devotional service actually flow from that understanding that he's the creator, he's the source of everything, he's the source of us. Therefore, we have a connection with him. Therefore, we're dependent upon him. Therefore, our perfection and our happiness and our constitutional position is to be in a loving relationship with him. This is why we understand God as the creator. That's why we want to understand these Purusha avatars, as technical as it may be. Prabhupada explains a little later on in the 2nd canto from Prabhupada's purport. Parikshit Maharaj asked Shukadev Goswami to tell him more. Tell me about the creation, how the Lord creates. And Srila Prabhupada says, Maharaj Parikshit did not ask his spiritual master Shukadev Goswami to narrate Lord Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. He wanted to hear first about the Lord's creation. Shukadev Goswami did not say that the king should hear about the direct transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The time was very short, and naturally Shukadev Goswami could have gone directly to the 10th canto to make a shortcut of the whole thing, as is generally done by the professional reciters. But neither the king nor the great speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam jumped forward like the organizers of week-long Bhagavatam readings. Both of them proceeded systematically so that future readers and hearers might take lessons from the example of the procedure of reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. So if we think, oh, I just want to hear about the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, I don't need to understand its creation. If you don't have that foundation of understanding Krishna as the source and creator of everything, you'll actually misunderstand those later pastimes. And therefore, there are so many people with corrupted and positively obnoxious interpretations of, for example, Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, because they don't understand Krishna as the source and creator of everything first. Therefore, this is important to learn. So then you may ask, okay, Krishna is the creator. How much of this process of creation do we need to learn? How much do we actually need to study this? And in one sense, simply knowing Krishna is the creator and knowing that and hearing that and believing and accepting that with full faith is in one sense sufficient. But on the other hand, the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita give many more detailed descriptions. So if someone has some brain for it, if someone has some interest or inclination, understanding more of the details of this according to his interest and according to one's ability is also a good thing. So I'm not going to give a class all about the process of creation because it's intricate. I don't understand much of it. And I don't know how interesting it'll be either for me or for all of you. But here's some summary of the process. This is from the 11th canto. This is the summary of the process of creation, step by step. Krishna explains to Uddhava, he's teaching Sankhya Yoga to Uddhava. He says that one absolute truth remaining free from material duties and inaccessible to ordinary speech and mind divides himself into two categories, the material nature and the living entities who are trying to enjoy the manifestation of that nature. So this is the first step. The Supreme Lord himself is completely transcendental to any touch of material nature. But still he divides himself into two additional categories. One is the living entities, one is material nature. This is also described in the Puranas, that Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta, Kshetra Gyakya Tatak Para, Avidya Karma Samyamya, Chitya Shaktir Ishyate. That Krishna has his pure spiritual energy and his pure spiritual existence. He also has his energy of Kshetra Gya. Kshetra means the field. The field literally refers to the field of activities, which is our body, which is the field for the living entity, and the whole material world, which is the field for the activities of the conditioned living entities. So Kshetra Gyakya Tatak Para. Tatak Para means these living entities are also spiritual in nature. And then Avidya Karma Samyamya. Then he also expands as his material energy, which is avidya, ignorance, and karma, consisting of fruitive activities. So these are the different, Krishna expands like that through his energies into the living entities and into the material nature. Then Krishna goes on in his explanation of these two categories of manifestation. One is material nature, which embodies both the subtle causes and manifest products of matter. The other is the conscious living entity designated as the enjoyer. So in this verse, it's important to note that of the material nature, there's an unmanifest form and a manifest form. And that the living entities are designated as the enjoyer. That means that our position in the material world, and actually the whole reason for the creation of the material world, is for us to attempt to enjoy, separate from Krishna. Krishna goes on, when material nature was agitated by my glance, the three material modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, become manifest to fulfill the pending desires of the conditioned souls. So as mentioned in today's purport, Prabhupada says the material nature has no ability to create or act by itself. But when Krishna glances over it, it becomes energized. I think in today's purport, he uses the word electrified. And then the creation springs from that. Let's see. Yeah, the creation springs for that under the guidance of the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. From these modes arose the primeval sutra, along with the Mahatattva. By the transformation of the Mahatattva was generated the false ego, the cause of the living entity's bewilderment. So the Mahatattva is the more or less unmanifested, undifferentiated form of the material energy. But Krishna glances upon it when false ego enters into the picture. By the transformation of that false ego, all the manifestations of the material world start coming out from the unmanifest Mahatattva. False ego, which is the cause of physical sensation, the senses and the mind, encompasses both spirit and matter, manifest in three varieties, in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Impelled by me, all these elements combined to function in an orderly fashion and together gave birth to the universal egg, which is my excellent place of residence. So the universal egg is literally the Brahmanda, the egg of Brahma, which is the spherical universe in which the Purusha avatar described in today's verse is residing. He's lying within that Brahmanda, that egg of Brahma, lying on the water. The lotus, Ambuja. Ambuja is the lotus. Literally, Ambu is water and Ja means born. So the lotus is a flower that's born out of the water. In this case, it's born out of the water collected in the navel of this giant Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And that's his excellent place of residence. So the summary of this creation process, without getting into unlimited details, is that the unmanifest material energy is expanded from Krishna. By his glance, by his activation, it expands, influenced by false ego and the three modes of material nature. And it differentiates into all the different forms and all the different elements and all the different archetypes that this material world is created out of. Just like in Friday's verse 131, the verse mentions Soda Shakala, 16 elements of material nature. So this is one description of the expansion, these Soda Shakala, 16 elements. The Mahabhuta, which is the 5 gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. The Karmendriya, which are the knowledge gathering senses, the eyes, the ears, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, and the sense of touch. Then the Gyanendriya, the 5 elements for gathering knowledge. I'm sorry, I just confused it. The Karmendriya, or the senses of action, my mistake there, I'm sorry, are the mouth which speaks, the hands which grasp, the legs which walk, the genitals which procreate, and the digestive tract which eliminates. These are the Karmendriyas. Then the Gyanendriyas are the senses of, what we normally call the senses of the body by which we gain knowledge: sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. And then the sense within, mind, which makes 16 total elements. Now, Bhagavad Gita has a slightly different list. This is from 13th chapter, text 6 through 7. Mahabhutyanya hankaro burir avyaktameva cha indriyani dashaikam cha pancha chandriya gocharai icha dvesha sukham dukam sangatus chetana jati etakshetram samasena savikaram uduritam. The 5 great elements: false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. So this is a slightly different list of not 16 elements, but 24 elements. Let's see, Prabhupada explains in the purport. There are 5 great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge: the eyes, ear, nose, tongue, and touch. Then 5 working senses: voice, legs, hands, the anus, and the genitals. Then above the senses there is the mind, which is within and can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are 5 objects of the senses: smell, taste, warmth, touch, and sound. Now the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. So sometimes there's 16 elements, sometimes 24. Later on in the 11th canto, Uddhava enumerates 28 elements. 28, or is it 26? Yes, 28 elements of creation. God, the Jiva soul, Mahatattva, false ego, 5 gross elements, 10 senses, the mind, the 5 subtle objects of perception, and the 3 modes of nature. But he goes on, he says, but some authorities say that there are 26 elements, while others cite 25, or else 7, or 9, or 6, or 4, or 11, and even others say that there are 17, 16, or 13. What did each of these sages have in mind when he calculated the creative elements in different ways? O Supreme Eternal, kindly explain this to me. So this should not be bewildering or confusing. And I'll tell another quick story from when my son was very young and I was homeschooling him. And I was teaching him about, in math, we were studying the concept of sets. So as in many devotee houses, if you go outside the door in the garage or in the shoe porch, you'll see a giant pile of shoes. Everyone leaves their shoes there. So me and my son, we went out and I told him, okay, divide all the shoes into 2 piles. One pile is the left shoe, one pile is the right shoe. So we did that, we had 2 piles. Then I said, okay, now divide the shoes into 3 piles instead. 1 pile Mata's shoes, 1 pile Pita's shoes, and 1 pile your shoes. So he did, now it's 3 piles of shoes. Then I said, okay, now divide it into sandals, sneakers, and boots, and work shoes. So then he did that, and now it's divided into 4 piles. So this is how the material elements can be understood and subdivided. It's all this, just like the shoes are all the same, but they're categorized differently. And Krishna explains, first he explains that if you argue about it, and if you get too attached to your own idea of what the creation is, this is simply the workings of Maya. That I create this illusion in people who are too attached to their own conception. But then he goes on and he says, but on the other hand, all of these sages with their different numbers of categories, all of them are actually right, because they're simply categorizing in different ways, and they have good reason for categorizing in different ways. So in any case, we could understand the general principle of this creation, that the material energy is coming unmanifest from Krishna. Krishna glances upon it, and by his stimulus, it's electrified and expands into further items of material energy, generally progressing from the more subtle to the more gross stage of existence, until we have this whole gigantic, amazing, and awful and awesome material world all around us. So this is the basic understanding. And it's all coming from these Purusha avatars, who are the super soul of the whole creation. Prabhupada explains that Karana Dakashai Vishnu is the super soul of the entire creation. And Garbhodakashai Vishnu is the super soul of the particular universe within which we're residing. And Kirodakashai Vishnu is the super soul in the heart of every living being within the universe, and within and between every atom of that universe. So again, pursue this as much or as little as you like, as much as it inspires you. But at least we can have a basic understanding and basic appreciation, because it impels us to understand Krishna and to serve Krishna. So this entire process is called pavarga. This creation and existence of the material nature is called pavarga. And pavarga means, without going into the whole thing, pavarga means the place of our material suffering. As Prabhupada explained in the purport, that this place is for the living entities who want to enjoy separate from him. And the result is that we're always frustrated, always suffering. This is called pavarga. And the opposite of that is called apavarga. So when we study creation, sarga, or janma, there's always the other side. Shrishti stiti pralaya sadhana shaktireka chayeva yasya bhuvanani vivarti durga. That in this Devi Dham, in this creation of the material world of Durga, this Shrishti, Sthiti, and Pralaya is going on: creation, maintenance, and dissolution. Or Janmadhyasyayataha. Janma adi means janma and maintenance, creation and maintenance and destruction. So wherever there's janma, there has to also be pralaya. So when there's pavarga, this creation and suffering of the material world, there's also a dissolution. Prabhupada explains in the 12th canto, 4th chapter. We heard in Friday's class how at the end of the creation that there's increased heat and increased fire, and the whole creation within the Brahmanda gets overheated and burnt up. So that description is there also in the 12th canto. It says, as the entire universe is flooded, the water will rob the earth of its unique quality of fragrance, and the element earth, deprived of its distinguishing quality, will be dissolved. So in that universal destruction, first there's great heat and great fire, and everything is completely burnt to ashes, and it's just basically the whole universe is just a ball of smoke. The whole Brahmanda is a ball of smoke. Then after that comes rain, and pounding, pouring rain for hundreds and hundreds of years of rain until the whole universe is completely filled up with water. And what happens, I'll read again, as the entire universe is flooded, the water will rob the earth of its unique quality of fragrance, and the element earth, deprived of its distinguishing quality, will be dissolved. So that process of creation from the Lord expands his material energy and then gradually expanding from subtle to gross. At the time of pralaya, this process is literally being reversed. The grossest of gross elements is earth. It's being robbed of its quality by the water and is being dissolved and lost by taking away its subtle nature. The next text is, the element fire then seizes the taste from the element water, which, deprived of its unique quality, taste, merges into fire. Air seizes the form inherent in fire, and then fire, deprived of form, merges into air. The element ether seizes the quality of air, namely touch, and that air enters into ether. Then, O king, false ego in ignorance seizes sound, the quality of ether, after which ether merges into false ego. It goes on, my dear King Parikshit, these modes are further overtaken by the original unmanifest form of nature impelled by time. So the point is, this process of destruction is simply the reverse, like winding back the clock of the process of creation. Now in the 11th canto, there is described this process of annihilation or pralaya, and 4 types of annihilation are described. The first is nitya pralaya. Nitya means always or continuously. And nitya pralaya means when you wake up in the morning and you look at your face in the mirror and you see more gray hairs than you did the day before. That's nitya pralaya. When everything moment by moment is getting older and wearing down and wearing out and dissolving and gradually being destroyed and dying. That's nitya pralaya. It's happening every moment, every second, every nanosecond of existence. This is nitya pralaya. Then there's the naimitika pralaya. Naimitika means occasional. And that's the pralaya that I described, how the universe, first it burns and it fills with water and all the elements are dissolved. And then there's Atyantika, there's Prakritika pralaya. Actually, I made a mistake there. The Naimitika pralaya is at the end of Brahma's day when there's only a partial devastation within the universe, not the total dissolving of the elements. There's just a partial devastation. Like in the Korma pastime, when the earth got flooded in the ocean, that's a partial devastation. The whole universe wasn't devastated, just part of it. That's Naimitika. Then after Brahma's lifetime is the Prakritika, where the entire universe and all the material elements are annihilated and reverted back to their original subtle unmanifest form. And the final kind of pralaya is called Atyantika. Atyantika means final. And this final annihilation is actually the liberation of the jiva soul. At the time of, during Nitya Pralaya and Naimitika Pralaya and Prakritika Pralaya, all of the material elements are being destroyed and wound up, but the false ego and the desires and the material conditioning of the jiva is still present. Therefore, the whole process starts again. But atyantik or final annihilation is when the living entity gives up his material conditioning and in that way becomes freed from material contamination. Now, how do the yogis do this? There's some interesting descriptions here. Time's getting short, so I'll skip the first description and I'll go to this one. We know in the story of, in the Bhagavatam and also in Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra, King Dhritarashtra was so sinful and so offensive, and he was so offensive and so contaminated that he couldn't take to devotional service. But still, at the end of his life, when his brother Vidura came back from pilgrimage, he preached to him and actually got him to leave home and take up a life of renunciation. And in that life of renunciation, he was living out in the forest and meditating and controlling his senses. And his life of offenses to the Pandavas and to Krishna himself made it too difficult for him to take to devotional service. But he attained liberation by reversing this process of creation, that he merged the elements of his body into fire and into earth and into the original elements. And in this way, gives up his material conditioning. Prabhupada explains, the living being, by his desire to lord it over the material world and declining to cooperate with the Supreme Lord, contacts the sum total of the material world, namely the Mahatattva, and from the Mahatattva, his false identity with the material world is developed, along with his material intelligence, mind, and senses. All these cover his pure spiritual identity. So this is the process of creation, as I described earlier. But then he goes on, by the yogic process, when his pure identity is realized in self-realization, one has to revert to the original position by amalgamating the 5 gross elements and the subtle elements, mind and intelligence, into the Mahatattva again. Thus, getting freed from the clutches of the Mahatattva, he has to merge into the existence of the Supersoul. In other words, he has to realize that qualitatively, he is non-different from the Supersoul, and thus he transcends the material sky by his intelligence, amalgamated with his pure identity, and becomes engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And I won't read it, but in the 7th canto, there's a long detailed description of this, of how the yogi meditates on each element being merged into the previous more subtle element and merged into that and merged into that until his entire material existence is finished and he's left his pure spirit soul. So this is the yogic process. And as usual, the yogic process has as its goal the correct understanding, but the process is so troublesome and so difficult and so mechanistic, and ultimately, especially in Kali Yuga, so impossible. No one can meditate like this. No one can concentrate their mind or manipulate their material elements like that, just like the entire yogic process in general. Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, is actually meant for the devotional service of the Lord. But first you have to behave like this, and then you don't behave like that, and then you have to twist your body into positions like this, and you have to breathe like that, and you have to control your senses like this, and direct your mind like this, and meditate like that. And it's a whole big mechanical process, which no one can do. And practically speaking, no one is even trying nowadays. They're just doing some exercises. But still, the goal is devotional service. So this yogic process of annihilation, the goal is also to attain Krishna, but it's so mechanistic and mechanical and heartless and ultimately impossible. And as usual, what the yogic process is unable to do as impractical and impossible, the devotee is able to do so easily and so naturally and from the heart. We don't have to meditate and merge this element of our body into that element and this element into that element and that into that until you're left with pure spiritual soul. We do it directly. Srila Prabhupada said, actually, there's a nice, in an old Back to Godhead magazine from 1967, they used to have a letters section where people would write in letters and Prabhupada would answer. So someone wrote in a letter and said, do I have to do all of the steps of the yogic process? And Prabhupada replied, you can walk the stairs to the top of the Empire State Building if you like, but the elevator is also there. Try chanting Hare Krishna. So this is a simple instruction. Walking the stairs to the top of the Empire State Building or whatever tall building exists now is theoretically possible, but no one's going to do it, no one wants to do it, and no one's able to do it without getting a heart attack along the way. But you take the elevator, which is chanting Hare Krishna, or more broadly speaking, the process of devotional service. So what these yogis are theoretically trying to obtain, the devotee obtains by skipping all the steps, by skipping literally the steps, like going up the stairs, taking the steps. He's skipping those steps by taking the express elevator up. He doesn't have to stop at every floor. Okay, earth into water, one floor. Okay, water into fire, fire into air, air into ether, ether into false ego. We don't have to do that. In one step, we go directly, and all these elements are ultimately merging into the Mahatattva, which is ultimately Krishna's energy. So the devotee simply goes directly to Krishna. He takes the material elements, for example, the material elements of his body, and he directly offers them to Krishna. This body is considered of the karmendriya, the senses of action. So we talk about Krishna. We use our hands to work for Krishna. We use our legs for walking to the temple. We use our digestion and our procreative powers, all of them in the service of Krishna. We use our incoming senses, the Gyanendriya. We look at Krishna. We smell the flowers offered to Krishna. We taste the Krishna Prasad. We chant Hare Krishna. All of these things, this is, in one sense, it's the same process as the yogic process, but it's directly taking all of these things and directly to Krishna, or the whole material world around us, our house, our business, our work, our food, our friends, our family, all of them directly engaged in Krishna as much as possible. And this is the exact same process. We're actually reversing the process of creation. All these gross material elements that gradually expanded from Krishna's energy, we're returning them back to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service. So simple, not simple. I've been doing it for years, and it's debatable how much advancement I've made, but it's simple in the process that it's not complicated and it's not at all inaccessible or difficult. We just have to apply ourselves to it. So this is what we understand from the creation. Krishna is the creator of everything, the source of everything, maintainer, and ultimately the destroyer of everything. And because of that, we want to dedicate ourselves to his life, to his pleasure. And in that way, our own pleasure, honor, and our own perfection is guaranteed. And this whole material world, which has been created through our ignorance to give us a place to play out our little game, our little drama of being the enjoyer, of being the master. The whole thing is reversed and wound up for us, and we can return back to Krishna. Prabhupada says in the purport of 1533, Bhagavatam, he says, that is the secret of spiritual success. We should not try to lord it over the material nature, neither we shall reject it by material conception of the thing. The best way of making the best use of a bad bargain is to use everything in relation with the supreme spiritual being. Everything is an emanation from the Supreme Spirit, and by his inconceivable power, he can convert the spirit into matter and the matter into spirit. Therefore, a material thing, so-called, is at once turned into spiritual force by the great will of the Lord, who is able to do so. The necessary condition for such change of matter into spirit is to employ the so-called matter in the service of the spirit. That is the way of treating our material diseases and elevate ourselves up to the spiritual plane where there is no misery, no lamentation, and no fear. So this is the conclusion. This should be the natural conclusion when we understand Janmadhyasya. This is the conclusion. The conclusion is devotional service to Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. If there's any questions or comments or discussion, we can do that now.
First, Acharya Prabhu, I want to thank you for a very complete breakdown of and references for the different aspects of how this material nature has been created.
Wow, it's not at all complete. There's so much details and stuff about this. It's mind-blowing to me.
There's a summary, maybe a summary.
How much detail there is. I barely scratched the surface, but thank you.
Well, pulling from the Bhagavad Gita, the 13th chapter, and then comparing it to the Bhagavatam, and then bringing the point that, your analogy of kind of breaking those categories into shoes like you did with Raja Krishna, and saying, let's not get too caught up in this. It's just different categorizations of them. Sometimes we see that, different numbers, 16 versus 28 versus 36, and then we may draw the conclusion that, there's inconsistencies here, but really there's no inconsistency, as you pointed out. It's just different ways of approaching the subject matter.
Yes. Like Krishna explains to Uddhava in that section, he said the inconsistencies are not a problem. Krishna actually says, just like, the Lord and the Jiva soul are so much alike in nature that there's no harm if in some categorizations they're put into the same category, and in other categorizations they're put into separate categories because they're so much alike. What Krishna says is the problem, the Maya, is when you get too attached to your own particular brand and you argue with others. That's the product of Maya. But not having different opinions or different analysis, that's not Maya.
Okay, let's see if there's any questions, comments from the devotees.
Like you were saying, Prabhu, there's just a lot of information, and I'm not sure it's going to happen in this lifetime that I will understand. But I was just taken by the enormity of this creation, from Krishna. We've only started from Karnodakshai Vishnu. I think later on we'll figure out where Karnodakshai Vishnu has come from and all that also. But from Karnodakshai Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and Garbhodakshai Vishnu, then Kshirodakshai Vishnu, and he's called Hari, and the incarnations come from Hari. I think in one of the last classes they were asking, why is there this confusion? Why do we always say? So it's because we haven't even gone back far enough to see where these incarnations have come from. But just from his pores have come many universes.
And you I'm sure what's the conclusion, what's the verse at the conclusion of all this long list of avatars? You know the verse?
In
this very chapter. Yes.
Etecha kalam pumsam. Yeah.
Christmas
I don't know the whole
Bhagavatam.
verse, but that is the verse. So, yeah.
Yes, that's exactly the verse. That's the conclusion of all this long list of avatars.
But just, from his pores come many universes, and we think this universe is so big, but there are millions of these universes. It's just incomprehensible.
It is.
How big this creation is. Just, I remember when we were, in one of the classes, Prabhupada had, I think it was Satswarup Maharaj that he was trying to say, you are this, or Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I think, you are this small person.
Tamal Krishna, yes.
But I mean, he was only, he only started it from this earth, I think. And then you think about this creation.
Yeah, that's a nice story. It's in the Lilamrita that Prabhupada was looking at a painting similar to the painting on the cover of the first canto with Mahavishnu with all the universes coming out. And Prabhupada started explaining it to Tamal Krishna that Mahavishnu's there, and from the pores of his skin, all these unlimited universes are coming out. And in this one universe, there's so many stars and planets. There's this one country, America, and this one place, California, and this one. And in that place, there's one Tamal Krishna, and he's thinking that he's very big and important. I'm paraphrasing it from memory, but that's how we can appreciate like that, the size of the universe and the smallness of us. But the other point is that as small as we are, this universe was created for us. It's here because of, and it can be reversed by changing my desire also. So we're very small, but still significant in relation to Krishna.
I think we may have lost Acharya.
Anything else?
There you go. Your screen froze for a second.
Uh-oh.
Sure, it's okay.
Am I back yet?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay,
Krishna.
sometimes I'm up here on the third floor, the internet gets a little wonky sometimes. Sorry about that.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so is this a cycle of, birth, death, again, going through the whole thing? I remember hearing Prabhupada saying, it's just like going to sleep. You go to sleep at night, and then when you wake up in the morning, you start all new again. First when you get up, at night you don't even remember what do I have to do next morning, what do I have to do. But as soon as you wake up, everything come back.
Right.
So I was wondering, I mean, how long does it continue, this cycle over and over? I mean, until...
As long as you want it to. As long as we're conditioned, then we're gonna be born, grow up, and die. And when we die, we'll take birth again. And then at the time of the Prakritika Pralaya, the whole universe is wound up, and all of the jivas who are still conditioned, they're also wound up in a dormant state back into the body of Mahavishnu. And then after another breath of his, which is so many, however many millions, billions, trillions of years, he breathes out again, and the universe starts again, and we do the whole thing over again. So within each creation, we're going through that cycle millions, billions, trillions of times. Our life is, 50 years, 100 years, or if we have to take birth as a bacteria, our generation time may only be 10 minutes. So in the course of a lifetime of Brahma, how many cycles are we going through? And that's just within one cycle, and that's happening over and over and over, countless, unlimited times. So how long it goes on depends on how long we remain conditioned, how long we want it to go on. Is that all right? And the only way to stop it is to take up the process of devotional service.
So then what happened when someone take up the process of devotional service? They're doing devotional service, and then whether they make it back to Godhead or not, then what happened to them?
When either their birth or the creation starts again, they pick up where they left off, as we learned from Bhagavad Gita. I think even it's described that Narada Muni, after he became realized, and then at the time, it was the time of the universal annihilation, and he was absorbed back into the body of Vishnu, and then he came out again as Narada Muni. So the process at the time of the universal destruction is essentially the same or similar to what happens at the time of death. That the material shell, the material details are destroyed and lost, but the karma and the desires of the living entity are preserved. And then in the next life or in the next creation, it starts again from where you left off. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, really so much of points you covered. It's a very, very, depth you covered, and so many things are there. Now we cannot make it in one class or one day. So, but you really covered very well all maximum points. You started from Shraddha, the faith, and that you quoted verse also, that one yogi nam api sarvesam, that was really good. One very common question it's going to my mind, Prabhuji, related to, like in the translation, if we go, so it said like from the navel take of his body sprouts a lotus stem, and from the lotus flower out of this stem, Brahma, the master of all engineers in the universe. So I was just trying to understand, Prabhuji, like Brahma, this Chaturmukh Brahma, is it talking about this Chaturmukh Brahma only for this universe is sprouted in the lotus stem, or for all the universe, numeral universe, what in the creation are there in the numeral universe, and numeral Brahmas are there, even 1,000-headed, 10,000, 10 million headed also. So they all sprouted there in the lotus stem of Lord, or so I'm trying to understand, Prabhuji. Please clarify. Hare Krishna.
I can't say that I'm 100% sure, but I had always assumed that the general process of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu lying down and the lotus sprouting and Lord Brahma being born is more or less the general procedure in every universe. That's what I always assumed. And according to the needs or the size or whatever of the universe, the Brahma may have different number of heads, just like there's that story about, was it Narada visiting Dwarka and seeing, Brahma visiting Dwarka and seeing some Brahmas with 4 heads, 8 heads, hundreds heads, thousands heads, millions heads.
Yeah.
So I had always assumed that the general procedure of creation is similar in each individual Brahmanda, but I don't have a verse or a reference to 100% support that. I had just always assumed it.
Okay, Prabhuji. Yeah.
I've heard some interesting speculations, and I'll preface this here. This is only speculations, that Lord Brahma has 4 heads. Sometimes they say, to see in the 4 directions, north, south, east, west. But I've heard analysis that means, for the 4 dimensions of this material world. In other universes, exist in higher dimensions, therefore Lord Brahma has more heads, but that's speculation.
Yeah, so just flash to my mind again, like if that is in that way, if we assume, so like Brahmi Vimohan Lila, this Brahma did only. So do we correlate that other Brahmas also did the Brahmi Vimohan Lila in their Brahmans? So maybe not.
Again, I cannot say for sure.
Yeah.
There's similarities between each universe, but they're not all carbon copies of each other. They all have different varieties. Just like sometimes it's said, like sometimes when Lord Varaha appears in one creation, he's one color, in another creation, he's another color, or in one creation, his pastimes are like this, in another creation, his pastimes are like that. So even within different cycles of creation within this one universe, there can be varieties in the Lord's pastimes. So there can certainly be varieties between the different universes. But what those particular differences are, I can't say.
Okay, thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Okay, I don't know how helpful that is. Basically, I don't know. No, I'll summarize, I don't know.
Yeah, Prabhuji, like Krishna said, Janma Karma Cha Medinam, those who understand, they are superior. So we are, means for me personally, I am at the lower level at all. So just trying to understand the things. So even though it helps Prabhuji by senior devotees, even though by their realization and experience, they imagine, they guess, so that even help for the neophytes and junior devotees. So thank you, Prabhuji, for your explanation and realization. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And one thing to remember is that in one sense it's very complex, but in another sense it's very simple. If we can remember and be firmly fixed that Krishna is the source of everything, therefore I have to devote my life to serving and loving him. In one sense, that's enough, although we want to engage our intelligence more and more in studying the scripture and in understanding Krishna. But that's the basic understanding that everyone, junior, senior, whatever, it doesn't matter, everyone can have.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Anything else? It's after 9 o'clock, so are we done, Jonah, Prabhu?
Okay. If there's no more questions, we can conclude here. Thank you so much, Acharya Prabhu. Again,
thank you very much for
very prepared
kindly giving me the opportunity to speak. And
Thank you very much for a very nice class. Very nice.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Tonight, just a quick announcement: the Sunday feast is back. The last 2 weeks we've been having, classes in Kirtan. Tonight we're going to be serving out prasadam outside. So, I guess to the complete extent, the Sunday feast as we once knew it has returned. Now, a quick mention: we're still going to observe, at least for a little bit longer, within the temple, the use of masks. Now, I've been out. I've been going to the stores, and basically throughout I've been in New Jersey, I've been in Pennsylvania, different places, and for the most part, people have not been using masks. So people may say, well, why do we have to use it in the temple? This is really to try to satisfy the comfort level of many people who are still, uncomfortable. So we want to encourage people to come to the temple and that not to be a barrier. So for a little bit longer, we're going to keep the mask mandate on within the temple. We do have air conditioning and good transition of air, exchange of air. Outside, we don't have to wear masks, but inside we'll keep that on.
May I ask a question to clarify, please?
Sure.
Someone at the temple said, "Oh, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear." But I just want to be clear that you want everyone to wear. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
For the public coming in. So correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And that will probably change within the next couple of weeks, but for the time being, that's where we're at. Other thing is we made a slight schedule change for the Sunday program. We are now doing the Artik before Prasadam, and then at Prasadam that will conclude the program after Prasad. So we gave some consideration to this. This is consistent with what a lot of temples do, is they kind of conclude the program with Prasad, and then people are free to, take the Prasad and go if they need to, or if they want to stay and associate with one another, that is also there. But everybody will encourage everybody to kind of be at that kirtan and be able to chant together. So at 4:30 there is Arti and Kirtan, and then we have Sunday program, which will consist of class. We're going to do some group japa, and then we'll have another Arti and Kirtan at 6:15. Prasadam will be at 6:45 tonight. So that's a little change in schedule. Not a big change. And actually this schedule kind of keeps consistency with the DD daily schedule, which have been altered a little bit for the Sunday program. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone. I know gradually, week by week, more and more people will start to come. It is a transition for everyone. So we look forward to seeing everyone. We hope to see you tonight. Have a great day.
Jai, Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Hare Krishna.